Welcome, everyone, back to the Small World podcast. It's great to have you here again. I'm finally not sick for the first time in like a week and a half. So there's a bit of a cough still, but I'm not sick. So thank you for everyone who wished me better health. My guest today is Ayaan, who we were just laughing about off air, is someone from Wichita, Kansas, where apparently there's a bit of a pipeline from Wichita, Kansas to top 10 school in the Bay Area, that being Berkeley and Stanford, and then into Y Combinator. So Ayaan studied CS at Stanford before he dropped out to become a repeat founder. He's currently running his company called Convexia, which was in the summer 2025 batch of Y Combinator. So you guys know he's cracked. I'm just going to say it there if what I just said didn't resonate with some people. So, Ayaan, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. And please tell me a little bit about Convexia.
Yeah, Nikita, thank you so much for having me on this podcast and for that incredible introduction. So yeah, to tell you a bit about Convexia, the goal of what we're trying to build is the world's first AI maximalist pharma company. What does that mean? What does the word AI maximalist even mean in this space, right? The way that we see it is that we think that a lot of pharma is transitioning more and more towards BD instead of raw R&D. If you look at where does revenue come for these larger pharma companies, it's leaning more and more towards mergers and acquisitions more than it is in-house R&D. And I think there's a massive wave towards that space right now. And the fact that AI can do a lot of that first 80 to 90% diligence that these pharma teams are doing right now, just like simple knowledge-based tasks, is I think a really key tailwind that we're picking up on. And the vision of what we're trying to build is essentially an AI, like we want to use AI to the fullest capability and fullest extent to do that first 80 to 90% of the diligence in making a decision about if a drug is good or bad. Will it hit the primary endpoints or not? Will it get approved or not? And then ultimately still have humans in that last 10, 15, 20% to make that final decision. And by doing that, we want to make the first AI pharma company that, instead of taking 2 years to make a decision about a single drug, we can bring that down to 2, 3, 4 weeks. Instead of having a lot of bias and just like relying on some senior VP at a big pharma company that like wakes up on the wrong side of the bed and just like doesn't pursue a drug. Now it's based all in hard coded science and math. That's kind of the vision of what we're going for. But the kind of key steps to get to there, which I'm sure we'll get to into a bit later down, are more oriented towards helping other partners do that first. And once we can create some of those initial proof points as to like, look, we helped XYZ partners run this BD process and we had our fingerprints all over that, eventually taking that as evidence will ultimately do it for ourselves in the future.
Got you. Yeah, I was wondering. Well, we'll get into it a little bit later. Save that point. Does it really take 2 years for someone to pretty much decide on a merger or an acquisition right now?
Yeah, so I think like the closest non-AI equivalent to what we're trying to build is Roivant, which is Vivek Ramaswamy's $9 billion plus company. Went public in 2021, and they had like an Axivan drug that went public a couple years before that. And for them, essentially at a very high level, their business model is that they have this core hub company called Roivant. And every time they find a compelling drug that they think will be successful, they purchase that IP, spin it out as a subsidiary company, and then that subsidiary company is then pushed forward. And each decision there takes around 2 years. They have a massive team, 500 plus people, very, very bloated, a team of like a pretty big investments team that then like they look through massive spreadsheets, they see this looks good, this doesn't look good, and then eventually that escalates to higher and higher people until ultimately someone makes a decision. And that's a very bloated, slow, manual process that oftentimes can take 2 years. Sometimes, of course, can take less, but many times it can take way longer as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a complete corporate circle jerk, honestly. Oh, okay, the
Of
analysts are
course.
going to do it and then pass it up, and the MD.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sounds like investment banking or something like that. Okay, so you have a different process, and looking into your website and everything, it seems like you have four agents who do four key tasks, right? Could you walk me through the significance of each agent and why the four of them together are the reason why Convexia is going to be the future?
Of course. So when you think of this entire BD process of buying or in licensing a drug, right? There's this process called search and evaluation of drug assets. So search meaning being able to find them, and then evaluation, of course, seeing will this drug succeed or not succeed. So the first agent that we have is the asset discovery agent. Now, this agent is essentially going out and looking through both structured and unstructured data to just find all the relevant drug assets. And the reason this is relevant is because when you look at a lot of the other competitors that are just doing drug sourcing, right, trying to find drugs, and when I say find drugs, I mean existing drug composition, not like trying to make new drugs. That's something completely different in itself. Like that's drug discovery. We're
Mm.
not doing that. We're saying looking at like labs, universities, TTOs, and other pharma companies, looking at their drugs. And a lot of these other companies that do this, they only look at structured data, right? They're very static, not hypothesis generating, not thesis aware. And what we've built in-house is an LLM first approach with a lot of our proprietary scrapers that are not only able to look at like structured data, but also anything unstructured, meaning like any PDF, websites, any language, really any form of a digital breadcrumb on the internet, we can find and bring through and bring that into a list that says, here are all the relevant drug assets, right? And so, for example, the input might be CDK12, which is a specific target for triple negative breast cancer. Find me all the drugs in China that hit these biomarkers and have more than 7 years of IP runway, for example. And we would go and find those drugs. So now you have a list of like, let's say 30, 40, 50 drugs. How do you actually know which ones to prioritize? How do you know which ones are worth, double clicking on and actually spending your time to learn more about? And that's where you get into this whole evaluation side of things, which are the next three agents. Now, before getting into what these agents are specifically, I'll kind of give you the high level overview, being that why is it that drugs fail? Whether that's in hitting the primary endpoints of a clinical trial or in getting pushed to market. In our eyes, there are three key reasons. The first being, of course, the science, right? The drug might not be safe or it might not be effective in human bodies. And if it's not safe or effective, like it's not going to go anywhere, right? That's
Hmm.
screwed, right? But a lot of drugs fail beyond just that, which is I guess one really surprising thing for us coming to this space. We thought like, yeah, if you figure out the science, like the drug will succeed. But that's very much so not true. Like the drug can be perfect, but drugs are very often still shelved because, for example, the clinical or operational risk, meaning that the person manufacturing the drug, they might not be the best fit. The person running the clinical trials might not be the best fit. The trial design, there's a host of different operational or clinical bottlenecks that might prevent a certain drug from actually passing the clinical trials. And then the third agent is the market analysis or commercial agent. And that agent is essentially looking at like think of like an equity analyst, right? What would they be looking at? They'd be looking at like running a DCF, a risk-adjusted NPV, um, market sizing, financial projections, IP landscape, all these types of things is the other kind of things of the other set of things that you have to de-risk.
Sure.
And then the kind of final step very quickly is that you take all this information and create it into a POS score, a probability of success score that is then used to help the client or help the person using this tool to evaluate where they need to spend the most time in further diligencing the asset.
Got you. Okay, so essentially it does seem like a very manual and sloppy process in a lot of ways. With AI agents, you're able to find all the threads, pull on the threads, right? And then the next step is evaluating whether or not they're actually worth pulling on, right? And
Exactly.
that's agent number two. Agent number three,
So,
sorry.
so yeah, I guess like agent two, three, and four are all contained within the evaluation side of things. So like the first
Got you.
agent is search, and then two, three, four is science, commercial, and clinical, which is
Got
like all the evaluation. And then the final one is like aggregating all of this into like a final POS, which isn't necessarily an agent, just more so like aggregating all this previous data.
Right. Okay. So you congregate all this data. How are you making money off of this? You said you're partnering with companies, right? So where do you come into them? Like, are you coming to them and selling yourself and then saying we can find you drugs and then they're going to pay you once you find a drug, or are they paying you for the service?
It's a lot of the above. A lot of these contracts are very customized. I don't think there's like a single like plug and play. Like we're not a typical SaaS platform.
Yeah.
Generally, our contracts are pretty customized and custom built to our clients' needs. So it could be something like in this space, there's this a lot of milestone-based payments. So like, look, we'll pay you upfront X amount, and if you hit XYZ milestones, we'll pay you more. It can look like that. Sometimes it looks like a SaaS, like a SaaS model. They're just paying us monthly. sometimes it could just be like a consulting type thing as well. Like a lot of the consulting type agreements we have right now are specific to rare diseases, where we're working very closely with a patient who has a rare disease, like a very, very rare disease. And we work with them, we work with the team and with the clinical team to actually find or build the best drug for that patient. So it can look like a lot of different things. Like the application of these core set of agents is pretty wide beyond just like pharma. It can be biotech VCs, other investors. It's pretty broad where we can apply things.
Makes sense. And taking a step back just from the business itself, listening to the fucking process just kind of pisses me off. Like, this is people's lives, right? People die because they don't have a drug that
Yeah.
can cure them. There are good drugs out there that are not on the market because of negligence. And that kind of pisses me off. I have people in my life who could have used drugs to hopefully survive if they had something better. I'm sure everyone does listening to this podcast. It's kind of shit. It really is. Let's take a step back to the founding of Convexia. You have an interesting story in that you and your co-founder have founded 3 companies before, right? Can you talk about how you came to the idea of Convexia and how you and your co-founder um, have met?
Yeah, of course. It's a pretty funny story. So there's some random ass conference in like Delaware when we were in eighth grade, right? And we just like both ended up being there. We were the two youngest ones there and quickly connected, became good friends, talked a lot about like, I don't know, typical tech stuff. And then from there, stayed in touch while we were in high school and worked on a couple of projects and then ultimately met again in when we both went into Stanford. So we're close friends in Stanford. And then we worked on our third startup while we were at Stanford, and that ended up going pretty well. And then the way that Convexia, I guess, or the way that that came around was actually through a conversation with my co-founder's dad, Rahul's dad, who's a translational researcher at the Baylor School of Medicine. And we were chatting with him, just like a pretty informal conversation about like, look, here's what drug discovery looks like. He was telling us some stories about like, yeah, I know people where like just in general, pretty large level stories as to like this was a really cool drug, but like the researcher didn't really want to pursue it, or pharma didn't really look into it too much, or it was too early stage, or it wasn't like it didn't match with the strategic alignment of what pharma wanted. Hint, that's just like anything that's a $10 billion industry, which isn't actually optimized for helping people, right? So there's like a lot of like, it was very clear that there's a lot of problems in how pharma operates.
Yeah.
And it seemed that there's a pretty interesting space to build in right now because of number one, these agents, number two, these in silico tools that like predict physical science are now getting really, really good. And third, that like you can build a $10 billion company with a really, really small team. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the vision of what we're going for, right? That like right now, pharma, why does pharma only look at like solid tumor oncology and GLP-1s and like 3 or 4 other places? Because that's where the money is, right? Like a pharma company only wants $1 billion plus outcome. But for us, as like let's say like a 5, 6 person startup, right? Like a $500 million outcome for us is incredible, right? We can
Yeah.
that the revenue makes sense for us. Like the economics actually make sense. But these pharma companies are so bloated, so massive that like it doesn't make any sense for them. So what that gives us the ability to do is like look into a whole new set of areas and spaces. And I think that's why we're like, wow, this could be fucking big. And we just like entered into this space from there.
That's a good point. Yeah, just the fact that there's so many more niches that you can go in. You
Exactly.
talked earlier, there's 500 people like deciding whether or not to even pursue a drug, right? Like, that's bloated.
Hmm.
That's bloated. Um,
Exactly.
okay, so I want to zoom out because AI is powering your company in a lot of ways. So where do you see AI in the future, right? It seems like it's been like really exponentially growing in the past couple of years. 2 years from now, do you see agents just being damn near like conscious and being able to do everything of human?
I don't think so. I think like I won't make like general AGI predictions. I think that's a whole other conversation. I think like defined or like confined to this space itself. I think this is still a very much so a relationship based game, right? Like the way this works is like there's not like a marketplace for drugs and like you could purchase, right? The way that a lot of these conversations happen is like, you're at Bio US and like you're at the bar and like you're chilling with like the senior VP of like Eli Lilly and you're like, oh, what's in your pipeline? Like what have you recently shelved? And like they're like, oh, this is something that's like that we're down to out license and like oh, and that
Hmm.
becomes like a $1 million deal or like sorry, $1 billion deal, right? So it's like it's still a very relationship based game, and I don't think like there'll ever be a point where agents are going out and doing everything, number one, and then number two, that there's no human in the loop to some degree. Like, do I believe that like 80 to 90% of what like anyone below senior VPs does like can be somewhat automated. Like I do believe that it can be largely automated, but I do believe that like there still will be a core set of humans that are still making the final decisions and actually like executing at the will of the agents. I think that's kind of my thesis on the space.
That makes perfect sense, and I'm pretty much aligned with you there. It does seem like there is going kind of like a wave or a trend towards like people managing AI agents rather than managing
Exactly.
other people, or hopefully, just for the sake of the economy, that there's a lot of analysts being powered by agents.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, so I want to talk about just like the next 1 or 2 years for Convexia, right? So you kind of built out an MVP a little bit further than that. Where are you focusing your efforts right now in order to get to the next step of the company?
Yeah, so a lot of I guess one thing that we've understood very clearly with our company is that data is really important, which is probably like a very general insight that like all companies have. But I think for us, it matters a lot because when you think about, I mean, in general in the AI space, right? We live in a world where someone can spin up an MVP in like in a couple of hours. And then like everything that we've built out, you can build like not as good, hopefully, but like a similar version very, very quickly. So like how do you stay differentiated? How do you actually capitalize? Like I think we very much so think that we're a first mover, but how do you actually capitalize on that first mover's effect? How do you actually like build on top of that? And what we think like our answer to that question is having really good data partners, right? Like as LLMs continue to get better, as people start to build in this space, everything will progress towards models being really good. But when models will never be like ChatGPT or like OpenAI or Anthropic or like any of these large LLM companies or like AI companies, they're never going to be able to like actually take in all the context of like how does 5AM Ventures, which is like a biotech VC, how
Yeah,
do they make decisions?
too broad.
How do these different companies actually make decisions? They're not going to look at their investment memos and make like and bake that into the model,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's what our thesis is that like for the next 2 years, like how do we actually bring on these data or bring on these partners, essentially like work with them to like get their not get their data, but like work with their data, understand how they make decisions, build a really good data moat using those partnerships, and then ultimately do this for ourselves longer term. That's kind of what the thesis is on how to stay differentiated, number one, and what will fuel our company to actually being differentiated in this world of like AI slop.
that makes sense. Were you scared of dropping out of Stanford?
I mean, I think it was our dream to build full time, and it seemed kind of like every day we woke up going to classes being like this is a means to the end. Like
Yeah.
we're at Stanford to build a startup, not to, go to Math 51. So it felt kind of inevitable. I don't think it was necessarily scary. I think it was more like a finally like now we can build type situation.
So it was almost relieving.
Yeah, to some degree.
Nice. Hear that, guy? Stanford sucks. Go Bears.
Hey
Uh,
man, that game yesterday was a fun game to watch.
I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. Did you go to the game?
Nah, I was at the game. I was actually in SF, but I went to Stanford later in the evening, and saw some friends and everything, so it was fun.
Okay, nice. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm taking this portion out of the podcast. Cut, cut, cut. I don't want to talk about it. No, it was a terrible game. Outside of, Convexia and just startup culture, like what do you do for fun?
I mean that's a loaded question, man. I think
I
like
know,
go
I'm
go
sorry. I'm sorry.
like go to the gym, man. That's about it. I think our days are pretty stacked. Start at like 9, 10-ish. Just like work till the evening. Head to the gym sometime in the evening for an hour, hour and a half. Come back, work for a couple hours, and then head to bed. Yeah, on the weekends, like sometimes meet with friends. Go to Stanford to these friends every now and then. Play some sports every now and then. I don't know, man. Beyond that, I think we have pretty monotonous lives dedicated to the startup. And within that bubble of like just building, there's like things that we're doing on it. Like one day we're battling, like literally battling lawsuits. Someone's like threatening to sue us. On the other side, we're like studying and researching papers. It's like it's a different beast every day, and that's what makes it fun. But I think beyond that scope, there's not too much we do.
No, that makes sense. And you're the third YC founder that I've had on the podcast, and I've asked all three, what do you guys do for fun? And they're like, "What? We just fucking work."
I know, man. It's crazy.
But that's what it takes. And for the people listening to the podcast, I'll say it again, just like a couple podcasts ago. For the people listening to the podcast, when it comes to like being successful and getting where you want to go in a startup, like you kind of have to make sacrifices, right? At the end of the day, there's probably some kind of party you want to go to, but it makes more sense to read the research paper, or in some cases, hopefully not, fight the lawsuit.
Yeah. And I think that the fun thing about like building a startup is that it becomes somewhat like it starts to become less of a decision. It just becomes like more of like a given that like yeah, I like the desire to go to the party just like starts to ebb away.
Yeah,
Like I don't like going to a party like this like sounds uninteresting. Like when I have like a when I have a like a $50,000 contract coming in tomorrow, like I don't want to go to the party. It's like I want to do something fun and like look at this and like try to serve that contract, right? It becomes like more it becomes less and less of a dilemma the more you get fascinated by the problem space.
yeah, no, that too, for sure. I definitely resonate with like just wanting to like dig deeper and deeper,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and the more you dig deeper, the more you realize how much there is to know, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings is, "The more I learn, the more I realize how little I understand."
Yeah.
Right?
Einstein. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful quote. So I want to round it out here by just saying thank you, and for hopping on the podcast, for dropping a lot of words of wisdom, and for
Yeah.
telling us how Convexia is going to take over the world. I had a great time, and yeah, hopefully we get to watch Convexia keep growing, and I can't wait to hear about the IPO in a couple of years.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. I'm excited to stay in touch.